Welcome to another episode of What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing? I am so glad that you are here today. I'm your host, Karen E. Osborne, in case you haven't met me before, and I am the author of four novels. My latest is historical fiction, True Grace. And I have a wonderful guest with me today. Her name is Janelle Harper. Hey, Janelle.
Hi, Karen. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm delighted to have you. I'm so glad you could join us. So let me tell you a little bit about Janelle. So she has written a book, a children's book. I think it's ages 4 to 8 is what it's aimed at.
Yeah, we say it could be for 0 to 8, but yeah.
Okay. 0 to 8. That sounds good. And it's called My Block Looks Like. And it's an Amazon editor's pick. Way to go. Way to go. A love letter to the hustle, bustle, joy, and grit of city life by a Bronx native. Janelle and her two-time Coretta Scott King Illustrator Award winner, Frank Morrison. So you did the words and he did the pictures.
Yeah.
Yes. And could you show us this beautiful book? Wait till you see this cover.
So this is the beautiful cover done
Look
by
at that. Isn't that cool?
Morrison.
I love it. I love it. I love it. So, like you, Janelle, I grew up very near where you grew up, just a zillion years earlier, but same place. So, what inspired you to write a book about your Bronx block?
So I grew up in the Bronx, the Wakefield section, and I just had the fondest memories growing up in my neighborhood. And I love being a Bronx kid. And I, as an adult, worked in public schools. And because I was so passionate about my borough, I was very intentional about teaching in Bronx schools. And what I often found was that my students just didn't know. Um, some important information about their borough, like it being the birthplace of hip hop. So this culture that they love, the music that they love, the dances that they loved, they had no idea that it started right in their borough. And I was just like, wow, there's so many amazing people, places, and things that happen in the Bronx, and we just don't hear about it. Often we're flooded with other images in the media. And so it was my love letter, for my community, for my students, for them to know and just understand that their block, their neighborhood, their borough is an amazing place to grow up. It's all these things that make our community special.
Wonderful. No, I always and I think 3 out of my 4 novels, I have scenes in the Bronx. And
Nice.
3 out of 4. And one of them, my first novel, I actually went back to visit the house that I grew up in, and I had my character go there and visit the house. I sort of replayed the scene in the book that I had actually lived. Uh, did you go to, Orchard Beach much?
I did. Yeah, so my dad loved going to Orchard Beach, because he also lived in Co-op City, so it was like a quick drive. Um,
You go.
and then, like they have the boardwalk, there's free concerts. So yeah, and then City Island's right there. So a lot of people don't know that City Island is a part of the Bronx. So yes. And so amazing seafood over there.
Yes, yes, spent a lot of time in, uh, at Orchard Beach and on City Island. So, how did you and your illustrator find each other?
So I'm traditionally published, so it works a little differently than people who are self-published. Self-published, they go through all the work of doing everything themselves, including finding an illustrator. But when you're traditionally published, the publishing house, they pair you with an illustrator. I was able to have some input, which was great. So I really had a conversation with my editor about, what the heart of the story was and who we felt would be best. to illustrate that. And Frank's name was like one of the names that instantly came to mind. And we wasn't sure if he was going to do it or not, or be able to, just because he's phenomenal and he just has a million projects going on. But I'm always of the mindset, just ask. You never know what happens. And so we did. And he said he never illustrated a story about the Bronx. And so he was intrigued, and especially being able to pay homage to hip hop because he's a graffiti artist. And so yeah, so he agreed to do the story. So I was delighted.
That's wonderful. That is so cool. Yeah, I'm published by a small press, so it's kind of in the middle between being self-published and
Mhm.
being published by a big house. And so we have a little bit more say into who and what, but still they find the illustrators and they find, but it's just a little bit more flexibility. So tell me, so I'm always so intrigued by writers that collaborate. So I know I've interviewed writers who collaborated with their children. I've interviewed couples that have collaborated. What is it like to collaborate with someone you don't really know? How did that work? How did that relationship evolve?
So when you are a picture book author, you really have to come to terms with it's not just your story. It's very much so the illustrator story as well. And for some people, that's kind of hard because you're like, oh, my baby, my baby. And I think that's why for me, it was so important to have a say and have like the conversation with my editor about who can I trust to be like, you got this, and we're good. And I know not everybody has that ability to do that. And luckily my publishing house really values my opinion and took my opinion, to heart when seeking out Frank. But I knew his work. He's done over 50 picture books. And so it was just like, he's got this. And so during the process, you rarely talk to the illustrator. So you write your words, you do your edits with your editor, and once that's done, it goes to the art director and they do their thing with the illustrator. Now you will get to see like proofs, and you can make like, some little feedback and stuff, but like not an overhaul. Like you never want to tell them like what to do. And so the beautiful thing about illustrators is that they add layers to the story.
Mm,
So um Frank did something beautiful that wasn't even a part of my story in my words. So when you read the book, you see a young girl going through her neighborhood. And you're like, where is she traveling to? And so you see her going through her neighborhood, coming across all these amazing places and people. And then eventually she ends up at a dance studio and doing a dance audition. Totally was not in my words a part of my story. But if I didn't trust my illustrator, we wouldn't have gotten that beautiful layering to the story. And so when you're a picture book author, like some books there is more of a collaboration, but generally speaking, like you kind of let go and allow the illustrator, to do their thing. And then you do get to see, the proofs and any little things, you wanna add to it, you can and give feedback, but yeah, you trust your illustrator to do their thing.
yeah, that's like turning your book over to a voice actor.
Mhm.
Once the voice actor's chosen, and you have a little conversation in the beginning about the
Mhm.
characters and stuff, and then it's like, okay. So I totally get
Very
it.
much so. Yes, yes.
You
Like
let them do their thing as actors.
mhm.
Could you show us some of the illustrations inside?
Yeah, so I'll show you, let's see. Um, so this is one of my favorite ones. They are on the subway, so you see the
Oh, yeah.
the street performers and the dancers on the subway. So if anyone's visited New York, we know what they mean when they say showtime, and then you start to get a performance. We have like the neighborhood with the playground.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah.
Yeah, and then my actual favorite one is when she's at her dance audition. So this was the extra layering that he did. And then
Beautiful.
illustrators do amazing things. So he added a portrait of the main character to the cover of the book.
Mm,
So
very
the
nice.
illustrator.
Yes, that is wonderful. That is wonderful. So before we got on air, I had asked you what you were working on, and you said it's a little hush hush, but what could you share about what's going to happen next?
Yeah, so I am definitely my next project will be another picture book. And so no specific date as of yet, but it's slated to come out fall 2025. So I get to have a year out with my block. Looks like it's so funny because everyone's like, "What's next?" I'm like, "This book just came out in January. This is let me live in this moment." But I appreciate the enthusiasm. So yeah, there will be another picture book in 2025.
Excellent, excellent. Um, and when you think about, you gave me some hints about it already, that you want young people to know about all the amazing things in the Bronx. But I would imagine the book is not just for residents of the Bronx. So, what would you hope? My youngest grandson does live in the Bronx, and he is 5, so I think he will love this. But what would you want somebody in a broader community to take away? What's your hopes for children reading this in the broader community?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yes, it's a love letter to the Bronx, but at the heart of the story is really about celebrating your community and where you come from, and recognizing what makes your community special, what makes your neighborhood special, whether you grew up in a city or a rural area or on a farm. There's something unique and special about it all, and just recognizing those things and uplifting it and celebrating it.
Nice, nice. So have there been authors that have impacted your life that maybe you read as a kid or older, whenever? Are there any authors that have had like a big impact on who you are as either a person or as a writer?
Yeah, so there's definitely been a few, and especially recently, who have really inspired me and gave me the courage to like write stories like my block looks like. So I think about Elizabeth Acevedo. She writes middle grade and young adult, and she's a poet. And so she wrote The Poet X, which is a novel in verse, and is also in New York. Um, and so when I read that, like, I fell in love with the form of verse and writing stories in that non-traditional, um, format, not the traditional prose format. It just felt more authentic for me and my voice. And growing up as a kid in the Bronx and being influenced by hip hop, that poetic language. And so people like Elizabeth Acevedo and Jason Reynolds is another author who writes in verse, and Kwame Alexander. He had a picture book written in verse, The Undefeated, illustrated by Kadir Nelson. And that's the one where I was like, oh, because at that point, before I read his book, I was like, okay, you do verse for, older kids. But he told his story in verse for picture books. And I was like, oh, so I can do this. And so that just encouraged me to tell my story.
Yeah. Excellent, excellent. And so you just recommended a bunch of authors that you like. Is there any other books that you'd like to recommend to our audience that they read?
There's so many great books.
You have
There's
to pick one or
Big.
two.
Okay. So I'm gonna recommend picture books since that's like my main genre.
Mhm.
But I really enjoyed recently Big by Vashti Harrison. Um, and I also really loved Nell Plants a Seed. So I'm drawn to like lyrical writing and beautiful storytelling. I also like intergenerational stories, and so I'm more inclined to read stories of that nature for picture books.
Excellent. 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 So how now that we've got your audience told my audience totally intrigued and they want to find your book and they want to be able to stay in touch with you so that they know when the next book is coming out, how can we find you online?
So my author website is janelleharperauthor.com. Janelle, Janelle, Harper, Harper. I'm also on social media. My handle is at BX Storyteller. So you can find me on Instagram and on Twitter.
It's for the Bronx. Cool beans. In case you missed that, guys. The BX is for the Bronx.
Yes.
Well, this has been wonderful. I just so enjoyed meeting you, and I so thank Ruby for introducing us. It was
Yeah.
just so nice, and I hope you guys have all enjoyed this episode, and that you will be not only will you buy Janelle's book, thank you very much, that you will write a review, thank you very much, and that you'll come back next week the next episode of What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing? A great week, everybody. Bye bye.